You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 205. On today's show, we talk with former opera performer and current arts consultant and producer, Matthew Principe. We discuss the performing arts industrial complex, hiring a qualified person to file your taxes, taking the emotion out of our financial life, saving 10% of your gross income for yourself, producing opera, theater, classical music, and multimedia events, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program for student loans, and networking, but not as an individual, doing it through organizations. Links to Matthew's social media, etc. are in the show notes, which can be found at artisticfinance.com/205. Now, he doesn't say it during the interview, but Matthew has 5 Grammy Awards, 2 Emmy Awards, and a Peabody. So I'm just throwing that out that he is a superstar, and I am honored that he took the time to join us. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome, and thank you for listening. I am your host, Ethan Steimel, broadcasting from Montgomery, Alabama. We are recording this July 13th, 2026. And the news, or I don't know how important of news this is, but on Broadway, 4 shows in the last 2 months have recouped their investments. So that is Giant, which was the John Lithgow starring show. And that had a capitalization of $5.6 million. And then Every Brilliant Thing had a capitalization of $5.75 million. And that was the Daniel Radcliffe star vehicle. Then Just in Time, which is a musical, which was $12.5 million to produce. That's recouped in a year or so. And then Purpose recouped at $5.25 million. And I'm just saying this because everyone's always like, Broadway doesn't make money, no shows recoup. And that is true out of like the 40 shows or whatever, or the 40 theaters. But that's still 4 in 2 months. And then there were several last year. Several shows are recouping. Congratulations to all those producers and people involved in those shows who then make more money once it's recouped. So good work, everybody. And today I welcome Matthew Principe to the show. Matthew, welcome. And where are you broadcasting from?
Thank you so much. It's so great to actually talk about this wonderful, wonderful subject of artistic finance. I'm actually speaking from Boston area in Waltham, Massachusetts. I was just in New York this week for a workshop of a new chamber opera, but right now I'm calling home base in Massachusetts.
Fantastic. And I'll just throw in actually that I'm in Montgomery, Alabama, because I'm lighting Beautiful, the Carole King musical down at Alabama Shakespeare Festival.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's a really nice show. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great show. But don't even, I could talk about it for a long time. It's great. It's a really great show. Okay. So can you, first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you fit into this beautiful entertainment industry that we're a part of?
Sure. It's like, all right, we're here in July of 2026. And who am I? I'm a producer. I work in multi-genre and multi-channel, if you'd say, multi-platform, I guess, because I also produce stage work. I also produce screen work and podcast work. Then we cut down to actually like the subject, and then we'll get a little bit more in my background, in which I was an opera singer. I went to school for vocal performance, so I have a piece of paper that says I can sing. In my performing career, I actually performed 25 operas and 25 musicals. So even in my own practice, I have my own caveat that all musicals are operas and not all operas are musicals, which is always an interesting conversation people have. And so, I've been in the industry since I was recording as a child at 11 years old. I was somebody who could hold melodies and sing tunes, and so I wound up being a children's recording artist for several things, for theme parks and children's work, as well as Fred Waring, Shawnee Press Music, which was a lot of choral writing. And so in school, since I grew up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, in school we would do even our own recordings from show choir, etc., and choirs that we would do those recordings to, demos and everything. So recording has been my history, performance has been my history, and then it kind of morphed into production with the Philadelphia Orchestra. When I went to school in Philly, I was both singing with the Opera Company of Philadelphia, now Opera Philadelphia, as well as working backstage at the Philadelphia Orchestra, really taking care of the musicians, the actual orchestra itself, as the orchestra personnel manager, hiring extra musicians depending on the orchestration and instrumentation, as well as just all that wonderful union grievances or stand partner issues, or I have 3 basses that we have to get onto this truck and they don't fit.
That's amazing. Stand partner grievance or issue. I've never heard that phrase. That's never I was even aware was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, we all work together, and as we know, violinists and stand partners, definitely, you're always sharing a piece, a score, or your music excerpt, and so it is. Those things can come up that people are having a tiff with the person that they have to see at 9 o'clock in the morning and don't want to see them.
Lovely, lovely. Well, I'm happy that you have dealt with those things and not me. Also amazing about the 25 operas and 25 musicals, because I have only worked on 2 or 3 operas in my life. And when I am in those groups on the performing side, I never think I would run into this person working on a musical. So I'm just curious, what musicals did you perform in? Like, because musicals there's such a wide range.
Oh, sure. And I'm not saying that they were at the level of Broadway or anything. It's just when I've been contracted for things, for gigs, they'd be whatever it would be. So I've sung like in Most Happy Fella, Man of La Mancha, Godspell, as well as the Fantastics. I was Matt in the Fantastics. On the flip side, yes, singing with the Opera Company of Philadelphia, it's L'Italiana e Nageri of Rigoletto, the Magic Flute, Die Zauberflöte, Carmen, the Pearl Fishers. It is one of those things we think of, like Paolo Jott, who sings in South Pacific. He's actually at Muni right now, but actually a few weeks before, he was singing The Light in Piazza at Opera Theater of St. Louis. So it's a very interesting idea of what your voice can bring to the stage, and your voice is your instrument, and your instrument can bring different colors, different styles, different resonance, that maybe your craft is honed towards a certain type of casting. However, there are plenty of people in opera who have grown up either in the church, and actually innately know how to belt, but then also can sing riffs, and in the classical music world, the melismas and the cadenzas and all those ornamentation, that we would call, but riff it off and enjoy that as well. So as somebody would say, well, you wouldn't perform this violin concerto by Mozart the way you would perform it by Rachmaninoff, because the different styles of what they were presenting at that time. And I would say the same thing is, I'm sure, like, actually, during COVID, I actually was singing on Fire Island, and we sang Secret Garden, Lily's Eyes. And yes, would I sing Lily's Eyes the same way that I sing Die Bildnis ist bezaubernd schön from the Magic Flute? Not so much, but there are times that I might bring in some color that actually is a little bit of both, and just having that good tonal resonance and complete vocal, that vocal cylinder that comes through the breath, through the voice, and out into the hall. That's always something to be mindful of, and vocal health is always a thing to think about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm impressed. You mentioned producing at this point in your life. How I'm just curious, because I'm not a producer, but I have a couple producing credits, and those are results of people just saying, "Can you help me out?" And then I just jump in and I sort of do whatever needs to be done. But you sound like you're a little more involved and organized, and you actually sort of like pick projects. So I'm just curious, how do you pick things that you want to work on or produce?
I mean, even going back to my performing career, I actually stopped performing once I was out of school. I was looking at grad school at CCM, College Conservatory of Music in Cincinnati, where they actually have both the music theater department as well as the opera department. And I thought that could be really fun. I was having some voice lessons there locally, and one of the teachers had noticed my phonation. I wasn't phonating vocally at 100%. And he's like, you should go to an ENT and check it out. I actually had 2 polyps on my right vocal fold, which actually hindered 30% of my vibration or vibrational capacity, if you could say. And long story short, I wound up having vocal surgery because as the ENT said, I don't know, could be cancer. And I thought that was quite poetic at 24 years old, cancer of the vocal fold of a tenor who would sing for a living. I had my own existential spiral, as we all do, but as my family said, well, it's okay. You're not going to die or anything. And you're like, well, as a performer and performing fully for so many years, that's a death in itself. And so my existential discussion and dilemma, I came to the idea of, if I'm not going to be on stage, I'm going to help other people stay on stage. And that's been part of my own philosophical evolution as a performer. Not that I was a college football player that was thinking I was going to make it pro, but it is kind of that feeling. And if you do have an injury that might sideline you, what then is your next iteration, and what do you think? So for me, producing was the act of helping people stay on stage, whether that is through the Philadelphia Orchestra or Santa Fe Opera, where I worked in the rehearsal department, or the Metropolitan Opera, producing live and HD shows, the intermissions, and being backstage with the artists, because I had that skill set of knowing what it takes to be on stage and helping find those moments and keeping artists focused on where they need to be and keeping themselves set, preparing them for the next segment that they're about to embark into, whether that is act 2, get your costume on, or we have this interview, just come over here a little bit. The evolution of independent producing that I've been doing, my philosophy is this a story I want to see in the world? And if that's something that I could help facilitate, which is what I was talking about with a workshop that I just did last week. But also, is this going to help me level up my experience and level up my ideas of how producing works? Actually, the first time I was officially an independent producer was this show in 2006. It was an off-Broadway play called Candy and Dorothy. And it was a straight play. It's a 5 or 6-hander. I think it's a 6-hander, written by David Johnston. But our assistant director on Turandot, the opera at Santa Fe Opera, we got together and we had a quick social cocktail time in Santa Fe. And then I ran into him on the subway and I was like, oh, Kevin Newberry, great to see you. And I just moved from Philadelphia to Santa Fe to New York. And just 3 weeks later, I ran into him on the subway and he sent me the script and he said, well, you said you wanted to get into producing. Here's a show we're working on. Then it was, as you're saying, we all kind of stumble into these. And from there, what my role in producing was making sure everything was, I guess you could say I was almost like the director of production on one side, making sure the show was actually financially able to go up and do the load in, do all the logistics, and then also the box office and trying to recoup that, as well as contracts and equity showcase codes, and just learning all those signatories and agreements, as well as how much do these props cost, how much does the set actually cost. These are things that I have no clue about. Even in lighting, I'm like, great. Just give me a quote. Let me know what you want. And then we can say what we can afford and how we can, as we all do the best on a shoestring budget. So that's kind of where I came up, and that's where my philosophy has always been of how can this project help me grow, and how can I help contribute to the betterment of, I don't want to say society, but like, you know, it's like, I want to see this show out into the world, whether I do that and help other people get there and facilitate that, or I don't have time, but these people really you should talk to and recommend that. And that's kind of a driving force for myself as well.
I love what you said about you were going to help other people stay on stage or help as many people stay on stage as possible. And then also like for the betterment of society. Both of these things are clearly things I agree with, because right now at Alabama Shakespeare Festival, it's just funny to me because the theater is in a park and it's definitely like a museum. And it's given me this new perspective of like, oh, me doing musical theater, that is art that belongs in a museum. Like it's different from like a concert. And I think that's something worth having in our society, like the financial troubles of mounting, putting millions of dollars into a musical that's only going to run for a month or two. Yeah, that sounds terrible when you say it out loud, but also I think it should exist. I think we should do that.
Yeah, and it's actually like it's a good philosophical conversation that you just brought up that I like to think about is the responsibility, and this is whether I start with the defense of opera, because everybody said, this is from 1700s, this is from 1800s, nobody cares, it's not relevant. It's like, actually, a lot of the stories have been around, but the actual operas have been around for 400 years. Why is that? Humanity is still resonating with this. And yes, maybe there is some patron gatekeeping and upholding and preservation certain things that might not be back into fashion. However, I like to say if you're going to be doing, a show in 2026 that was written in the 1970s, is there a resonance that is reflective of our time that is hitting? And that's the power of live performance, that we come to this, everybody comes to it at a different moment. And that's what I love. Like, you could see Bohème. I've seen Bohème thousands of times, and you say, okay, it's a standard, it's in the canon. Everybody can have a point of reference, whether it is, oh, I know La Bohème, oh, that's Rent, and you're like, okay, got it. But there's a resonance there. And anybody who comes into a performance space, whether it's you're coming after a terrible fight with your boss, or a fight with your spouse or your kids, or you got shoved on the subway and you're irked, or you're just really exhausted, and then you find the solace in the theater, and it's a communal space that we're reigniting each other, and we're also reflecting and having moments of performance and reflection and story that I think is so worthwhile in our society today. That this is a collective, whether this is post COVID, or even for me, I think all of our strife has started during the internet, in which we've siloed. We don't have to discuss things. We can just look it up on Google and have our answers. And so that actually limits our interaction with people. We started to have those trendy no phone dinners or anything. You're like, nope, we're just here living in the moment. Let's just have dinner. Nobody look at your phone and have an actual present discussion. And that's what live theater actually helps us do as well.
Yeah, so much good stuff there. One, I started teaching this last year, and sometimes in class, students would ask me a question, and I would say, I don't know. And then they would start to look it up, and I say, no, no looking it up. We can make a list, and we can look it up later if it's important, but like, we can't just, do that all the time. And then also, funny you say about La Bohème and being Rent, because Rent is coming to the West End next month, and, maybe we'll see it on Broadway again after that. But yeah, the story, the story's good. It resonates. Anybody not being able to pay their rent.
Right. I mean, here we go. Here, like now we're really talking about the housing crisis versus just living as an artist in the East Village. That's where it is. And as you're saying, it was in the French Quarter that it was a book, La Vie de Bohème, and now an opera, and then a few hundred years later. And I think, is this actually like the first revival? Because I remember when La Boheme on Broadway was running at the same time as Rent on Broadway. So you could see the different presentations. And actually, Atlanta Opera did it either 2 seasons ago or last season, in which they actually in rep on the same set performed Bohème. And then the next night they performed Rent. So it's really cool.
That is super cool, super cool. And then one more reflection on what you were saying about you got into producing to help other people stay on stage. So actually, I don't talk about this part as much of the podcast, but the reason I started this conversations is back pre-COVID, I had started getting the idea of like my wife had wanted to move to Chicago from New York to be closer to family, and I was thinking about my long-term career, and I was thinking, well, maybe if I got into producing, that's something I could do a little more at a laptop and remote, and I could like versus lighting design where I have to go somewhere and sit there for a couple weeks or whatever. I was like, maybe if I want to have a family, maybe this is something, anyway, that's where my brain went. But as part of that, I started looking into it, and then I said, there's all these lighting designers in the world, and depending on what part of lighting you get into, you can make a better wage or not, TV, film, opera, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, there's so many people in my circle who are not super wealthy. And I thought there has to be a way in which I can get my lighting designer colleagues to get like a financial stake in a show. And so that's actually part of the reason I thought, well, I'll start having these conversations and I'll figure it out. Now, here we are 6 years later, and I have not solved this because I at least like the way it's structured now. And there's 1,000 ways to do anything, but the sort of standard way is you have to have money in order to get a financial stake in the thing, or you have to put a lot of time and effort and be wanting to do it. Like it's not something you can do passively or not make a choice about. And so I've sort of let that side of it wander away because I can't figure out how I can help my colleagues. But then the other part of it too is I thought, well, I can produce because I was in New York for 10 years and I worked with like all these hole in the wall theaters and all these playwrights and fellow directors. And I was like, I want them to get more work. Like I want them to get work. So that was also like a big push for me was I see all these shows going up that find producers or get on Broadway. And I'm not saying they're bad shows. They're great shows. But all my playwright friends, they have shows that I think are equally as funny, as equally as thought-provoking, as equally as all this. And I thought, I want to help them get their stories told. So anyway, so all that, I haven't really helped anybody or done anything, but my heart is in the same place as yours of I want to help other people fit into this society in the financial stratosphere so that they can sustain their careers.
I think that alignment and that awareness, and whether it's self-awareness of, as you and I were both reflecting on and mirroring each other of, oh, but this is actually really good work. And it's a curatorial aspect that we're having that like, nope, we're picking this project because I want this to be out into the world. I remember when I joined Facebook, and I would just post so many articles, so many things of randomness, never actually have my opinion on it. Here's a YouTube clip. Here's this performance clip. Here's this cool art thing that's happening. When, I was working at the Metropolitan Opera, and if somebody was attending, I would go and say hi before a curtain and just say all this stuff. And, networking and meeting people. A friend of mine would be like, oh my gosh, you have to meet Matthew Principe. Like he does so many different things, but you have to follow him on Facebook. I don't know what the things he posts, but I know I need to pay attention to them. So I was like, oh, that's a curatorial producing kind of aspect. And I also think, that's part of audience development, and what a lot of us talk about in the performing arts industrial complex, in which that's what I call it, of we need these artists, we need an audience. And how do we build an audience? It is about putting out publicly to your own network what you find of value. And it might not always be a direct transactional relationship in which we are producing this go buy tickets to this. Instead, it can be, this is a cool new book that's out there that is something that I believe you need to be part of, or you need to just nurture your own experience, which, as when you go into certain cities like New York or Boston or Chicago, there is a cultural aspect, and then you can go further and go into people's neighborhoods, and then you really find a cultural aspect of different areas and vitality of humanity that I always think is how we can contribute doesn't always have to manifest it in, I'm the money guy, I know how to do this, I've got the entire visual identity and brand identity for this, and this is how we're going to put this together. I have all these strategies. Like, that's my philosophy on a producer is, I don't have to know all the answers, but I do need to crew up and hire the people who do know those answers. So when somebody asks me, I know how to look at Ethan and say, lighting, what is this about? And that's where it's like, okay, you're the specialist, but tell me why this is a necessary thing, so then I can actually talk to the investors to then sell them on this necessity.
Why do we need 5 follow spots instead of, or no, how about Jersey Boys? Why do we need 4 follow spots instead of 2? Well, there's 4 of them.
Right, exactly. It's like, well, there we go.
Silly example, but that's just always the one. Is it's all, somehow we always end up with 2 follow spots. I don't know. Circling back to you, what is a live event that you like to experience yourself as an audience member?
I really can't whittle it down to a live event. Only I say that because I still, as a source of pride and living in New York, right before COVID, in 8 days, I went to 10 live events. And so it is like, oh, is this a Broadway show? Is this a Shaft at the Apollo, the Shaft, the film at the Apollo Theater in Harlem with a live orchestra? I'm like, that's cool. So I think what attracts me, and I'm actually wearing a shirt, you can see it's Movement Festival, which I just backed up to show the insignia. Movement Festival is a techno festival in Detroit, and it's on the River Rouge, that connects between Canada and Detroit, and it's just a destination, but it's an environment, it's a community, and there's lots of fun lights, and I like to see how an audience gathers and how they react and what their vibe is. So that's another thing. So I'm getting older, so general admission is not the favorite thing because I don't like standing for so long, especially when there are 2 or 3 opening acts. But I do like to actually have assigned seats nowadays. But I will go to almost anything that is multi-platform or multi-dimensional, multimedia. That's what it would be. Like, we're in 2026. My biggest thing right now is Rosalia. I saw Rosalia on tour. Her album really spoke to me because I think it is a song cycle. It's a song cycle about, or from, Catholic canonized women from around the world and from different eras. So it's multilingual. It's in 13 languages, but also multi-instrumental with the London Symphony Orchestra, but also one half of Daft Punk contributing, and the Pulitzer Prize winning Caroline Shaw also contributing to this. And then the tour itself had an orchestra in the center of the arena. The show curtain was actually the back of a visual paint canvas. So you actually had the wood frame and the canvas, and then it split open, and that's what the stage was. And there were always these references to different artistic visual art pictures, like Goya and Degas the dance. And so just having these references that might have impact, and if you know, you can pick up on it, and if you don't know, you're still moved by it. That's kind of what I want to see. You don't have to know everything when you go to a performance, and you can kind of enrich yourself differently.
I love that because there's so many times that I go see something and then later I'll learn about it, or someone will explain the symbolism about it. And totally silly example, but I went and saw Jersey Boys. For whatever reason, I don't know a lot of pop culture, so I got out of Jersey Boys and I was like, telling my friend, I was like, this was an amazing show, like so good. And they're like, those are all real songs. And I was like, I was like, now that I'm thinking about, oh, Sherry sort of sounded familiar, but like me knowing about that whole story or those people or that music didn't matter to me. Like the story was told well and the songs made sense. And then also there's like an intellectual thing where I sometimes think I'm not intellectual enough to be in theater or the entertainment industry because all these people, all these designers and people, my colleagues, they're like so smart with like references to art and history and all this. And I've been through some training and I've been through those classes and I've looked up the stuff and I know about it a little bit, but I can never recall anything ever.
Oh no,
And
absolutely not.
yeah. And so there's so many times where someone will be explaining the symbolism of a story or something, and I'm sort of feeling like a little like not imposter syndrome, I suppose, but also I think like I still enjoyed the story, not knowing any of that. Like I didn't need to know any of that because it's about that like human connection and what do I relate to and what do I pull out of this?
And I think that's a very critical role of a producer. I agree with you in which I am not an academic person at all. I have experienced things and I have sat and experienced shows or gone to museums. Fine, but I am a dilettante in understanding all of these things. I am a nerd in certain aspects and then absolutely not in others. But I think that's actually really essential to a producer to come in and see the forest through the trees, and that you are the audience creator. You're not the playwright who has been sitting with this material or the director who's been sitting with the material. And you're able to take a step back and say, is this what you wanted? Because I have questions here. Is this what you intended? Because it's not connecting to me. And that's a good thing to talk with a director or a writer or even the lighting designer of like, I noticed this change. Is that supposed to be a change? And you're like, no, we're gonna fix that. And or it's like, I saw this person enter from this side and then they entered from a completely different space. You're like, good, because that's supposed to be a time difference and we're doing a shift perspective. Good to know. Or it's like, oh, well, if you don't understand this reference, I'm like, that for me is a red flag for anybody to say, if you don't understand this reference, then you're never going to understand this, because that alienates people that might just want to come in and have an aesthetic experience of like, I don't know what happened, but wow, that sounded amazing. The biggest reward that we should have is once the curtain comes down, the audience is still talking. And even if it is like, that we do that with movies all the time. People go see a movie, 90 minutes or 2 hours, and then everybody just blogs about it. Like, and then you have to get up on the memes or up on this and how people are talking about it. And you're like, okay, that's a pop culture zeitgeist kind of feeling. That's what live performance should be as well.
Yeah. And I love watching stand-up comedians who say, like, at the beginning of their set, they'll be like, where are my old people at? Where are my middle-aged people at? Where are my youngsters at? And then everybody cheers. I love those moments because it's like, yes, entertainment is intergenerational and we all sort of pull out what we want. And theater is that same way. It's generations of people coming, and we don't get to pull that out in those experiences. We just have to, like, as an audience, we just experience that we're all here doing this. But yeah, entertainment is for everybody, and I think that's like what a good show is, right? Like a 10-year-old and a 70-year-old can go see the same show and both love it for different reasons.
And it is that question, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because some people are talking about we're losing our audience, or there's tale as told as time. The audience for opera and musicals and Broadway is aging, and you're like, okay, well, if you want to say that, I don't think it's necessarily aging, but the audience development has dwindled because we don't have arts education in public school. It is not a publicly funded idea, in which that was compulsory for those in the United States. You attended music class, or you attended art class, or you attended these humanities classes. And with the diminishing of those publicly available and accessible, that is where I feel we're hitting that dearth of connection. And so the interesting thing is, even I'll keep going with COVID of everybody sitting at home, but Spotify, for better or for worse, they have data, and they have said time and time again that Gen Z actually listens to classical music. They actually listen to these things, whether it's purely for an aesthetic. I like hearing acoustic music. It's softer. It's not as in your face. And so I can just be an environment. And Basquiat would always say, art decorates walls, but music decorates time. And so that's a thing that maybe some people will think of. But they were also talking about taking a step further, that those people who, as you're saying, had an aesthetic experience, whether they were 7 or 70 at this piece, did they know everything? No. Do they want to know? Maybe. So afterwards, people are talking about they're actually having salons where they do have listening booths, or like, let's listen to this album. Let's discuss how you're feeling about this. Or does anybody have any tidbits, like VH1 pop-up video? And so the curiosity is still there within our civilization. Do we have the structures there to help people get there? And I think it's much more diasporic in that way, as opposed to everybody's got the public school education and this is what we all learned in 7th grade and that's that. We've lost a lot of that. So I just think that's a very interesting connection to all of it.
Yeah. All right. More about you. Are you good, bad, or neutral with money?
I would say neutral. I'm really good with other people's money. I'm terrible with my own money. So yeah, I can't tell you what my monthly nut is, but I can tell you what this show's nut is. Um, and so I used to say, when I was putting myself out there, I can always do high quality under budget, and we'll always make sure that whatever resources we have, we will still put something together that is beyond. However, I did have my own existential crisis. I want to say 2013, a colleague of mine who actually had an accountant is like, let's take a look to see how you've been operating personally as an individual. Let's take a look with my CPA and what you do in entertainment, and if any of that actually is correct. Because there are a lot of things that you spend on your own personal research. You might have freelance gigs, even if you do have a W-2. If you also have a 1099, there's investments of people are not reimbursing your educational credits, or anytime that you go see a show, or anytime that you purchase something. So I went through 5 years of my taxes. The CPA went back and saw them and saw that I was producing films, I was putting things out for distribution, and they're like, well, all of that is tax deductible. Everything that you're working on is tax deductible. So when they redid my taxes for several years, I got a significant refund coming back. As talking about earlier, like, I might not be an expert in lighting. I'm also not an expert in taxes. So I hire people to actually trust them to do those things.
In 2013, had you been filing your own taxes before that? Who had been doing them prior to that?
Yeah, I've been filing my own taxes. I was like, oh, okay, well, I just have, this year I worked at the Philadelphia Orchestra and I worked at Santa Fe. Cool. In 2006 is when I first had my first independent show that I was producing myself. And I still just said, okay, well, whatever. And I actually had, when I started freelancing at the Metropolitan Opera at the December of 2006 and 2007, the IRS came after me because I just didn't pay taxes because it was all 1099. And they put a lien on, and then I said, okay, well, maybe I should figure out how this all works. And our mutual friend, Cookie Jordan, who we actually met because I was a performer, and she was our wig designer for several shows at the Opera Company of Philadelphia. So that's how we met before we became longtime colleagues in New York. I agree with her in which I do not pay any 1099 quarterly taxes because I'd rather be prepared for what it is, but I'd rather be having that investment in my savings account, that interest going into my account as opposed to the IRS's account. Because basically what we are doing is giving them a free loan until we reconcile it, in February to April of the next year.
Yeah, that is so good. And the CPA, I don't file my own taxes. My father did it through college. Thank you, Father. And then
Mine too. Mine too. Yeah.
when after that got married and we filed together, like we paid an accountant to help us. So I've never filed my own. But in 2023, I tried to use TurboTax because my brother was like, do it, blah, 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 blah. So I spent like 16 plus hours trying to figure it out. I still had 2 states to go and like my taxes, and I just gave up. I was like, I'm so overwhelmed. So then I sent it off to the person who'd been doing our taxes for us. I had owed like 3,000 or something. And then once they filed the taxes, we got 5,000 back. And I was like, that's an $8,000 difference. And like they cost $1,000 or so dollars. So, okay, $7,000 difference, but that's still $7,000 difference that I would have lost out on.
That's worth the investment. And that's a thing. I mean, that is definitely something that I see in the performing arts industry, that we, and especially community theater or community opera companies, we're just like, oh, we'll do it on our own. It's like, actually, when you hire the specialists, you actually save money. It is worth the investment. And that is part and parcel for that, in which I did the same thing. As long as I didn't owe taxes, I thought I was fine with doing taxes on my own. And then I realized, oh, you mean I'm losing $6,000, $8,000 every year by doing it on my own. And that's what I learned when back in 2013, it was like 2018, I think we could only go back 5 years, but we started redoing starting in 2013. And I just realized I missed out on so much money by not hiring a CPA. And as you're saying, it was worth the $400 at the time. Yes, I pay $1,000 a year now, but it was worth that time and that money. It's like, yeah, if I'm getting back $5,000 and I only paid $350 to get that, come on.
And then also last year, there was a little show that I associate produced, so I didn't have a financial stake in it, like in any of the paperwork or anything. And I also did the lighting design for it. So that I had a financial stake because they paid me to do the lighting design. Anyway, somehow our accountant came back and he was like, well, it seems like you did a lot on this, blah, blah, blah. And somehow he got us like a bigger refund because he was able to use like the time and effort I had put into that show. And I don't even know how that works. Like, I'm not going to ask him, like, can you explain to me why you were able to do that? But that's not something I would have ever figured out. I have no idea what he did, but I just know that he told me our refund was bigger because of that.
Yeah, you could always make the case. Like, at 44 years old, I actually had my first car, which when I moved from Astoria, Queens to Detroit, and I drove out there, and they said, okay, well, do you want to put all your payments onto this year, or do you want to do it over the course of 5 years when you've got this loan and you're paying back everything? How do you want that lined up? How do you want to present this? And us as we can't think that way. So hiring a specialist to help you shape, to get you to make a decision, whether it's a yes or no, that's a beautiful thing. And just as a caveat, don't want to scare anybody, but you usually, when you sign with the CPA, that they say it is the client's responsibility to explain this. So if there is, and I actually did get audited one year when I moved to Detroit, I was audited. And then we realized that the CPA put in one of my 1099s. They forgot a digit. And so it wasn't $10,000. It was $1,000. And so they're like, oh, that's why there's a difference in the liability.
Yeah. And yeah, it's not all roses because same thing for us. There was one year they didn't put a check mark that we lived where we lived. And
Right.
so we get this notice, we sorted it out. And it was like, oh man, that annoyance just for that one little check mark.
But I think we also live this as artists. And I can't speak for you, Ethan, but I have lived in fear of finance. And I have lived in fear of knowing what is rightfully mine. Oh, is this a loophole? Am I scamming the system by doing this? It's like, well, no, this is what's available. So having that CPA gave me a point of advocacy that you're not swindling anybody, you're not finding these things. However, this is what you are legally what is legally available to you, which is also very similar to almost so many other government institutions, that we actually have these services available, but we live in a society where we don't make it widely known that these things are available. So we just think, oh, we shouldn't be relying on these things. And it's not relying. This is what we're supposed to do. So having that exercise, that was 13 years ago, has really changed my outlook on whether feeling threatened or having that concern. And it was funny because, yes, I did spiral when I got a piece of mail from the IRS saying you're being audited. I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. They're going to take away my house. I will go to jail. I'll never have a job again. And you're like, oh, it was just because the CPA missed a comma. And you're like, oh, okay. So it helps you like settle things down of just like, this isn't a dramatic thing. I always like to say, keep the drama to the stage. And, it's like, all right, well, let's just parse this out and see what's going on.
That experience that you had was with the CPA, right? You had the CPA, they filed it, and then that's when you got audited. It wasn't like you tried it on your own and then got audited.
Correct. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is the CPA might also make mistakes, and that's okay too.
That's okay. But I wanted to point out, we had lighting designer Isabella Bird on, and they had the same thing. They had put like 100,000 and it was really 10,000. And so the IRS was like, you were paid at the 100,000, and she didn't have a CPA. And so it loomed over her for 8 years until she finally sort of got to a place where she could hire an accountant to be like, can you figure this out? But it was like dread for 8 years. Ooh, yeah. And then also that show I associate produced, so they didn't file their taxes. So there's some like whatever March deadline for, if you have an entity that's a show, you have to file your taxes by a certain deadline. And they just didn't do it because there was a GM swap and just a little bit of a hot mess. So they reach out to me and they say, Ethan, do you have any accountants that you can recommend? Because we missed. And I'm not going to say they're freaking out, but they're freaking out. They're like, no. And so I say, oh yeah, let me just forward this to my accountant, because he never once has worried about anything. Like, it is so impersonal. It is so transactional. He could care less. He's like, these are the laws, these are the check marks, these are the forms. And that's it. There's no emotion. So the fact that you missed the deadline, he sees missed deadlines 1,000 times a year. And he knows, okay, so if you miss the deadline, you just fill out this form, you say you missed the deadline. But we're like, oh no, we're going to be put in jail because we missed the deadline.
But we think about that we work in live, which I also think is hilarious, because on the flip side, you and I have a specific skill set that we just roll with it. And when somebody says go, and you're like, all right, well, missed that. Okay, we'll catch the next one. I actually directed for Boston Baroque. I directed their live streams. And before, they had somebody who worked in film, but never in live broadcast. And so I was talking with the camera crew, and I was constantly just on comms with them and just talking through things. And like, okay, well, let's find the bassoon over there. Great. And let's go to camera 4 and take 4. And then sometimes we would miss something, but we rolled with those punches. But we also, whether it's a violin performance or a lighting cue, the moment you miss it, it is absolute dread. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to get hired back from this. Oh my gosh, if I'm this lighting operator, I'm never going to get hired back. And you're like, it's okay that we do that. And we take things personally because we are the performers in that moment. That CPAs and people who work in producing, like as you're talking about, like, I can work remotely. It's like, yeah, when you're in pre-production and, we still have deadlines, and then once we're actually in tech, go and make sure that this is happening and execute the actual beautiful work that everybody's prepared and rehearsed for. But yeah, we take everything so personally.
All right. So going back before your career, did you have good financial examples to learn from?
No, not at all. My parents didn't talk to me at all about finances. I did learn how to balance a checkbook, but that was it. To my detriment, Ethan, when you were talking about your dad taking care of your taxes and everything, yes, my parents took care of my taxes, but also they took care of my taxes until I was 24 because they used me as a dependent. So they got the tax benefits. I would always be paying taxes, and they got the tax benefits of me being a dependent, which was not true. Like I don't want to say, I don't want to incriminate anybody, but it was that like, oh, okay, so let's see what's the cause and effect, and there wasn't any actual explanation for those things. I also remember my mother telling me that I could go to any college that I wanted to as long as I got good grades, and it's like, no, that's not true. We have to take a look at how much everything costs. And I really was financially on my own starting at 18 years old. As a result, I didn't know where I was going to go if I wanted to go to secondary education, but I did wind up going to state school because of the financial burden.
Were you responsible for it?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I was also at that in between because we didn't have the floor of poverty, but we also did not have, we were on a very low middle income bracket. So we didn't qualify for a lot of financial assistance. But thankfully, I did have scholarship. But once I graduated, all the loans came onto me. And actually, I graduated in January of 2000, and I finally paid them off in October of 2021 because of, thankfully, the PSLEF, Public Service Student Loan Employment Program, or what is federal, whatever, I forget whatever that thing was, but we had it. If you worked in nonprofit for 10 years, you served the community and our country, that you got that that benefit. And so it took me 20 years. It didn't take me 10 years.
It took you 20 years with that program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wild. That is awesome. And also, I'll just say, now that I'm a parent, I have a 3-year-old toddler, that I feel like parents should be able to claim dependents up until they're 30 or 40. So I'm going to claim my son until he's 40.
Oh, I absolutely agree. But I was like, wait, I'm paying rent on my own. And so, I mean, that's the thing.
No, I with you. And I also went to a state school. I got into the private school, and they gave me a lot of scholarship, but I wanted to go there, but I just looked at it and it was like, I cannot financially rationalize, like, I have to pay this money back. And yes, I know I can take loans to cover it, but I can take a smaller loan to pay for the state school, or I can take a larger loan that is going to take forever. And then I just, in the sweet irony of life, I now teach at the place that I couldn't go.
Uh-huh. That's beautiful.
I'm not saying there's any bitterness in there of like, I'm good enough to be your servant, but no, not good enough to attend.
But it is that thing is, and as you said, yes, I went to state school, and I knew some things were changing professionally over the past few years, and so I actually did apply and started my studies for my MBA. Which, as you know, in the theater world, we learn so many things on the fly, and whether it is a formal education or on the job training. And I decided to get my MBA because I didn't have any student loans anymore. And then, but I came with a different approach of, I need to figure out how to pay this in full before I have any student loans. And yes, this is a little bit different. A master's program is only 2 years. This was an executive MBA program, which was 1 year. And that's what I was looking in. And it was funny because my partner at the time was floored that his master's degree was $40,000 and mine was $10,000. And I was able to pay it right then.
That's awesome. At the start of your career, which I guess we'll say when you got out of college.
Right. Yeah, I had $40,000 in debt for student loans, which you can defer, and which I did, but that doesn't mean you defer the interest. And I did have a job at the Philadelphia Orchestra. I did have some credit cards because I wanted to be fabulous, and so I definitely was always living beyond my means. I did have.
Wait, I have to interrupt here. So Cookie Jordan, if anyone wants to go back and listen to Cookie's episode, they didn't have a credit card. They just didn't have one. They kept saying, I don't want to have one, whatever. And then they, I think, wanted to purchase a home. And then they just opened one up and got it and built the credit in like 6 months. Like, because there's a whole thing about credit history to take out a loan for a house, I think. But Cookie's the opposite of you, of like not having the credit cards.
Yeah, the whole cash only thing. I was cash strapped because I was in school. But I also, while I was in school, I had 3 part-time jobs. I worked in retail. I had a church job in which every Sunday morning I sang, and I would always say that Jesus paid my rent. And then also I did have a waiting tables. But when I graduated college, the waiting tables, I actually was a singing waiter. And then I had my church job. And then I also had singing in the chorus of the Opera Company of Philadelphia. So I was making most of my income performing and using my voice. So I was proud of that. However, I also had I don't know if you would say it's a standard of living or the cost of living, but if you want to go see a show, if you want to go have this, and I was under, I guess it's under the operatic slash classical music tradition of we have to present publicly in gowns and tuxedos and look the part that upholds this glamorousness that we can't actually do that off stage. And basically, I always say that we're a bunch of rock stars that, wear jeans and t-shirts backstage, but all right, now we have to put on our costume, which could be a tux and tails and everything. But I definitely was not that. I'm like, let's go out every single night, let's go do this, let's go here, and all those things. Yeah.
All right. So now, do you think or worry about money on a daily basis?
Not on a daily basis, but yes, I absolutely worry about money. I'm currently freelance. I say I'm in season 2 of my involuntary freelance era. And so I'm feeling that I don't have the steady job. And I did work at the Metropolitan Opera for 15 years for that reason. I was in the middle of producing a few shows freelance, and I needed some feeling of stability, that I knew a check was coming in every week or every month, that I knew what I could plan. But right now I'm in a precarious situation, but it's, as other people have said, you're doing better than you think you are. So I don't know if this is a mental issue that I have, that I'm always worried about the next thing. Whether that's the arts of, oh, we've got this gig and you're like doing it for the next 3 weeks. And you're like, yeah, but what's next? Oh my gosh. And we have to live in the eternal anxiety of living. But
I think it's a combo of the arts and freelancing that worry, because I must say the people with the steady paychecks have much less worry. I've just noticed. It's just an observation.
Yeah, so I'm finding I do also a lot of consulting that it will give me a monthly retainer. And so at least I know some of my income is coming in, and so I can rely on that. But as right now, I have some things coming up that is actually like day work. And so, great, I can pick up this gig and I can tell my clients I'm just not available for this weekend because I've got this going on. And they're like, yeah, great, cool, talk to you later. So managing my schedule and seeing what gigs are coming in versus longer term clients.
Nice. You mentioned no student loans. Congratulations. Do you have any other debts in your life?
Yeah, I got back to the credit card debt, but I'll be finishing that by the end of the year, getting that out of that debt. I paid off my car, and currently I do not have a mortgage. I've been renting. We'll see what happens in the next phase, if I do put that together and buy some property. However, I think that's really all I have. I do also have a retirement account and several savings accounts, but I am just trying to figure out the credit card management versus savings accounts, and seeing what that's actually where I am, in which my savings accounts, how I've been investing the rate of return has been higher than the credit card interest rate. So I've been getting myself ahead and then saying, all right, pay this off to avoid that.
That is great. That is awesome. And I just want to say something that's so obvious, but I did not figure out until 2 years ago. Put your money in a high interest savings account, because mine for my entire life was just getting 0% in Bank of America,
Oh yeah.
Chase, or whatever. And I knew. And then finally we did some episodes called the Financial Independence Book Club series. And Amy Deluxe was like, you got to switch to the higher savings. Like there was a book that just made it so painful. Like you have to do this. And so we made the switch, and it's now been 2 or 3 years. And they have a counter on a Basque Bank is the bank we use. It's an online bank. And right now I think the interest is 3%. It was like higher, 5%, I think
Yeah.
a couple years ago. But it says that over our accounts, over the history, we've made $10,000 in interest, which that's like, it's spread over 3 years. So it's not like crazy, but like that's $10,000 that I would not have had I not gone from Bank of America and put the savings over into Basque. So I'm just glad you mentioned that interest rate, 3%, like if you have a credit card that's less, it makes sense to keep it in the bank account.
And we do have, as you're talking about, like, oh, if I just get that $20,000 gig, I can pay this off. And as you're saying, we think too big than incrementally. And it's like, no, trust that this daily interest that you might be accruing will actually show up and be an amount. On the flip side, that loyalty that we think that we're supposed to have with customer loyalty, and it's a generational thing, because it used to be all banks were the same, and it's just, this is my local bank, I'm taking care of my local teller, this is helping my local economy. But nowadays, switch your credit card accounts, go over to that 0% APR for the next 14 months and transfer those balances over, pay them off, and just make sure that you're really monitoring what that is. And that you're saving money too, because as you're saying, it's like, well, if I'm getting 17% APR on this credit card, but I can open up another one and transfer for 0%, and I have savings that's at 3.3%, I'm still getting ahead of the game. And that's okay. Just when you're transferring the balance, don't say, now you have $15,000 of free credit money, and then you just pay it and, like, start charging again. That's what we sometimes get into trouble for.
Yeah, the loyalty, that's a hill I will die on. You do not owe loyalty to anyone. And the way I cope with this is I say, I'm just data to this company. Like that's what they
Correct.
want me for. Like I can jump and be somebody else's data pawn, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like, it's loyalty to people and loyalty to our fellow artists and fellow humans, that whether that is like, you're down in Alabama right now and seeing that audience, that's who you're loyal to. You're not loyal to the banks.
Exactly. But actually, funny you say that, because even Alabama Shakespeare Festival, which is a storied institution that people know about,
Oh yeah.
Quinn Gresham is the artistic director. Deidre Goodwin is the director that brought me down. Seth Howard is the set designer. Christopher Chris is the sound designer. Emily Buckheit is the stage manager. They're all amazing people, and I am loyal to them as people, not
Yeah.
Alabama Shakespeare Festival. Anyway, so this is also, it also applies to the arts.
Right. And it is that thing of like, sometimes it's like, yes, the institution will hire a director, but then the director is like, well, I've got my entourage that I love to collaborate with. And so that's a discussion that a lot of people will have. But it is that thing, is like, yeah, I've done 2 or 3 shows. Like even my producing partner, Kevin Newberry, he's a director. He's actually in rehearsals right now at San Diego Opera. I think they just opened up Fellow Travelers at San Diego Opera, but he's also opening it, the same production, in a different location at Glimmerglass Festival in upstate New York. That's opening this weekend. And we've been working together for over 20 years. It's like, when he's hired, or you could say commissioned by an opera company or a theater company to work, and he's like, okay, who are my 3 or 4 lighting designers that I like working with who might be available for this? So then I'll bring them around.
Yeah. I love this conversation.
Good. I am too. I'm
Um,
so grateful to be here.
Have you ever used a budget?
Oh, I use a budget all the time. I definitely will do a show budget. And then the funny thing is, I actually changed my show budget to be my schedule C budget. So then I actually take a look and look at all my expenses and I categorize that. So then it turned into, oh, this is what I spent in 2014. Now let's see if that can actually be my budget for next year, or how I want to recalibrate these categories.
Wait, so you're saying you take your show budget and then you look at the expenses and you put that over.
So I would take my template of my show budget and you're like, okay, here's labor, here's venue, here's lighting, here's props, here's set, here's costumes. Great. I wouldn't do that. I would now change, like, here's the bank issues or the financial organ things, and then here are my utilities, here's my rent, here's my office, here's my research, here's my this. And so yes, the categories are not the same, but the actual template of the budget and putting in, like, that's the cover sheet is there, and this is how I got into line producing, of like, the cover sheet is there and you can create your own GL line, and that's what I've been doing. And then yes, even my credit cards, I will, copy and paste all of those transactions into the Excel spreadsheet, and then I will categorize them I code them. And that's how I've learned how to scale, actually, from an organizational budget to a project budget to my own personal budget. And so then I look at, what did I do in 2013? Now that informs me on how did I track my expenses in 2014 and see where things are going.
That is amazing. Okay. And that's basically like what I do too, is like I've either the first time we filed taxes or at some point I got all the categories and then I plug the things into the categories of like what you just said. I will say the one thing I'm like old fashioned about and I know I'm clunky about is the credit cards. I just scroll through my credit cards and then the ones that I'm like, oh, that's an expense, then I manually put it over. So I know I'm like old fashioned and time consuming on that part. So I got to work on that on myself, of like automating that a little bit more.
Well, like, I do the same thing, because I think about, if there's a question, how can I rationalize this?
Yes.
So
Me too.
that's kind of where I am, and that's why I cut and paste all transactions into my data sheet, but I don't actually categorize them. So then I can see that this is actually the transaction, but I told myself, no, that isn't an expense that I can actually do.
Okay, that is amazing. And I save my tab every year, like in the document. And I will sometimes put a note like, I talked to this person, or I did this thing, or it was for this project. For that exact reason, I'm like, if I get audited, I can go to the sheet and then be like, it'll jog my memory of like, oh yeah, that was because XYZ. So even though it sounds outlandish, like I had to buy a new computer for this show or something like that.
Yeah, of course. And I also feel like it I actually take pleasure in doing the Schedule C. It is tedious and mindless. However, it is a diary of all your accomplishments of last year, or what your challenges were, but what you actually were able to do, or like, it, you take inventory on where you think you're going to be for the next. And also, since you might be doing this on April 12th or April 14th, you've already got the first quarter of the next year already thinking if you're on track for what you're doing. So I love going through and be like, oh, right, I did go to San Diego and I saw this show, and then I worked on this gig, and then I actually had a studio recording that I had to do here, and that's why this expense is there. That's beautiful. I think that's a great diary.
Yeah. The financial self reflection of who I am as an artist and what I did, in the past moment. I love it.
Yeah.
What is a really good financial thing that you have done in your life that you think other people could emulate or replicate?
It really is kind of that Schedule C, but also, I don't know if they are still doing the student loan forgiveness program. That's what it was. Student loan employment forgiveness program. But you should check to see if that is still around and get yourself up on that. That was the thing, is back in the 90s when I was starting my loans, I didn't know that I could qualify for this, and I didn't sign up. But I also realized that I actually didn't have federal loans. I had Sally Mae loans or something like that. So at the time, I just let this sit for over a decade. And what I should have done, because I lived in this fear, I could have moved that into a federal loan. And that's what then allowed me to actually participate in this program. So having that sense of agency that I can do this, and as you were saying about your CPA and how impersonal it is, all of this stuff is just movement. It is impersonal. It is the opposite of what we do in the arts, where we long for personal connection. All of these things of like moving money around take the emotion out of it. And I think that's actually the biggest thing that we have to say is this is completely objective work. Finances is objective work. This is based in facts, whereas subjective work is, and what a lot of the stuff that we're rooted in our practice of aesthetic. Do you like how this person's saying? Do you like how this color looks? Do you want to change it to hues later? And that's all subjective, but the finances is completely objective.
I sometimes wish lighting were objective.
Right?
Like, this is a good light cue. Everybody agrees. It does, but it's not like that. Instead, I just sit there in angst, even on opening night, and I'm like, maybe I should have changed that a little.
Yeah, but how many times do you like, oh, thank God you're giving me a roadmap? Like scene one, the costumes are in green. You need to make sure that you don't light in green. And you're like, you put the puzzles together and you can say, this can be a little bit more structured. But yeah, because we just did that. The first time I actually ran a tech in which the lighting designer, I said, okay, we're in a courtroom, but I want this to be like fluorescence. This is really nasty. And they're like, okay, fine. And then I'm like, okay, you get the ability to make art. Let's collaborate. This is the emotion that we're feeling. They're like, cool, give us 5 minutes. And they're like, great, this is what we're thinking. I'm like, cool, sounds great. That like having that subjective conversation is what we all yearn for, but that's not in finance. This is what the law says. This is how much money you have, cash in, cash out, do it.
All right, I know we said we can't just Google everything, but the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program is still around. Also, the teacher loan forgiveness. So there are solutions to giving these loans forgiven. So look into it. But good to know also about the jump to federal. The flip side of this, what is a bad financial thing that you have done that you would suggest that other people try to not do?
Sometimes, like it's something that I've learned. It's so weird because it goes into my head of Susan Powder, but paying down debt and then looking short term as opposed to looking long term. We all have to manage what our day to day is and how we feel in our comfort, but sometimes that is to the detriment of our long term goals. So if you might have a windfall, you have a great gig, pay yourself first. Always take 10% of whatever gig you have and put that in your own savings. And please, whatever you do, don't touch it. I've done loans against my retirement accounts, and then I've also taken the tax hit by early distribution of retirement accounts. And then I start over again. And I think there are other times where I would be a little bit more prudent on how that cause and effect works. And that's what I'm doing now lately. I'm being a little bit more savvy with the savings that I do have and how to manage savings versus debt and how we can do that to keep the long-term impact. Because I'd much rather have money still gaining interest and compound interest over all these years than I would just having the day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and that's a good point because I always am saying everybody should open up a Roth IRA. It's
Yeah.
the best thing. Put money in it if you can, max it out for the year if you can. But there is also an element of once you put it in there, it's locked up, and if you need it, you have to pay the penalty on it.
Yeah.
That's just also something to be mindful. I mean, life does what life does, but here I'm saying like put it in the retirement account because I personally need it locked away so that I won't, because I'll see the pain of the penalty and I will leave it there. And I think that's good for my future self. But you also have to be mindful that, okay, if in a pinch, would it be better in a high interest yield savings account? Because then I won't have to worry about the penalty. And so it won't grow as much as if it were in the stock market or whatnot. But I'll have peace of mind for a little bit.
It is iterative. Through your experience, you've learned that this is okay. And then once we have more and more ideas and develop our own agency around finances, then we can get a little bit more savvy. But practice, we all just got to practice at it.
I know you're freelancing right now, so I assume you're all 1099 income.
Yeah.
But I also know that you, for that 10 years that you were working, you must have done on W-2.
Oh yeah. I do a balance between I actually like having a W-2 if I can have a gig, even if it is a seasonal gig that will help me take out taxes, then my tax liability is smaller. However, that's what I did for like the last 5 years, in which I had one gig that was a W-2 and that was a full-time job, but then I also had a freelance gig that was a 1099. So now I'm on 1099 and I'm really nervous about what my liability will be. But last year, like your expenses and how you managed all this, there was a net zero. I received $38 back from the government, but I only paid $38 in taxes. So they're like, you can't get any more than that. So
That's hilarious. That's amazing. Just right now, I guess in this phase where you're freelancing, where do you find work or how do you get jobs?
yeah, it really is networking. It's networking, but it is networking organizations. I am a member of the Producers Guild of America. I'm also a member of Opera America. I'm also a member of the Podcast Academy, also the Recording Academy of Arts and Sciences, so for the Grammys. And this is not just right now. I've had membership, except for the Recording Academy that actually just happened last year. But I have been networking, and most recently, it's been very funny because in the opera world, I was just at the Opera America conference and seeing people that I've known for decades, and that's great. And it is, I heard from many people. So this is what you're doing now, and so that's always good having that long term understanding. And so people are like, oh, we know who Matthew is and what are the activities that he's doing now. What's his alignment, and see how we can find that synergy and what is that impact. So I'm always keeping up on my social media to let people know, but then it is the one-on-one interactions with my network. At the Producers Guild, it's always been really fun because that is traditionally more screen work, so film and television. And I was always just called the opera guy. But there are people in the Producers Guild who actually do produce on Broadway, or they have interest in opera. So they're like, oh, well, you know, this person and this person and this person. And actually, it's really funny, the synergy, even this past weekend when I did a workshop, that there were people from the film world and people from the stage world converging. And we had so many mutual friends, but we just didn't talk to each other. So that Venn diagram overlap was really fantastic. And so that's been an interesting thing, is the genre helping that Venn diagram work in my favor with my network. But yeah, it is letting people know that I'm looking for things.
Yeah, that is so important. Of like, we had somebody on the show say, if you don't ASK, you'll never GET. If you don't ask, you won't get.
Yep.
And I've found that in my own experience of, I think even this beautiful that I'm doing right now, I had a panic in like fall of 23 or 24, and I just emailed like 10 directors. I don't work with that many directors. So I emailed like all 10 directors I work with or like working with. And I said, hey, I'm going to be honest. I have no work lined up and I would like some work if you have anything. But more of the story is that I wouldn't be here right now. I mean, maybe Deidre would have asked me, right? But also maybe when Deidre got the show, she was like, oh, Ethan had said he was looking for work.
That's the thing about it can't be transactional. You have to incept these ideas, because as you're saying, it's like we work in such a goldfish bowl of anybody that doesn't know where you are for in the next 5 minutes, then you're out of sight, out of mind. But as you just said, it's like, oh, do I have my own newsletter? I would say my social media is my newsletter, and I let the algorithm decide. But if there is something concrete, and I did post on LinkedIn after I finished my studies with my MBA, and I said, a lot of people know of my personal events that have transpired and some of my professional events, but if anybody's looking to collaborate, let me know. And this is what I do. 20 minutes later, a friend texted me saying, hey, do you want to produce an album in Mexico in October? And I'm like, let me check. Yes. So it is keeping those relationships.
Okay, so you have mentioned social media, I think 3 times now. I am infamously struggle with social media because again, it's that you were talking about like zone in on the smaller picture or the short term versus the bigger. And I'm like always looking at the big picture all the time. That's just how my brain works. Social media, I have the same aspect. If I struggle to like get in on the little microcosm of it and or the manageable part of it. How does social media like how do you deal with that in your life? Like your day-to-day life, like how do you manage it?
I have the philosophy that it is an extension of you. It is not a presentation. I am an anti-influencer, anti-content creator. But in the funny thing is, I create content, or I share content. So I just think really it was on my Facebook that just evolves into other things, but it's now evolved onto my Substack that I really liked putting things out that I wanted other people to see in the world. And so it's not about me. It's about this is a really beautiful moment. Take 3 minutes and watch this piece of art. Or this is current events. These are things to be mindful of. It is not a transactional thing for me. And that's actually been my brand philosophy for institutions that if everything is all about this is my new show, come buy tickets. This is my this and this is my this and me, that is really deaf and it turns everybody off. So I always think about, oh, this is something that's happening on Broadway that people need to be mindful of. This is something that's happening in my world that people need to be mindful of. Hey, I'm throwing a party. Come see this party. It's the extension. I use that way. I don't think of it as a direct return on investment. However, Substack right now, I write articles. And these articles are evergreen. I don't really talk about this is what's happening next week and have an expirational date. That's my social media. I don't do expiration dates on social media because it'll come back and haunt you, or for better, for worse, or it might be something that people will come back and be like, oh, it's been that thing of people talk about that with Facebook, in which you'll send an article from 1988 that's talking about Cats the musical, and people you now have to put that caveat that this was from 1988. I'm like, that's great, that has value, but living in the zeitgeist culture that I'm not interested in, especially in the Broadway and performing arts world.
All right, that was a selfish question because I exist on Instagram and on LinkedIn only to post about the podcast when I release it.
Sure. and that's fine. That is a lot of times I'm like, yeah, this is my new Substack article or this is my new thing. And it is a little bit LinkedIn that way, but other times I always think about, are you reposting somebody else's thing that actually might be germane to the conversation that we just had? And it is that thing. It's like, oh, 2 weeks ago, one of the projects that I directed won a regional Emmy. And you're like, great, that's a LinkedIn thing. That is a social media thing. But other times it's like, this is actually a really cool discussion that we should be having. So help share that or those things. And so if it's coming from me, maybe it is an article and maybe it is self-promotion, but a lot of times it's resharing other people's items.
Yeah, because I always post and I say, here's this interview I did. But now you have me thinking, and I should say, here's the interview and here's why talking with Matthew was really cool. And I need to add that a little bit in because I've always been like a little careful of like, I don't want, because I have this thing where like every out of sight, out of mind, right? So it's like the latest episode is the best episode I've ever done ever. And I'm like, I can't say that every time.
Right. Well, it's, even talking about Cookie, it's like, oh, here are some things that Cookie, who I interviewed on this episode, here's something that just happened with them. And so it builds your network. And as you're saying, it's like in my shameless self-promotion, you can share one of my Substack articles and say, had a great interview. Here's this fella. Let's, this is what he's into. Can't wait to publish that podcast.
And also, I'm not like a friend of mine, Elena Sartor, who was a guest on this show years ago. So they're an actor. They're producing this show that they did like an acting class. It's like a minuscule budget. It's like everybody gets a stipend. $12,300 is their budget.
Okay.
But They're doing it. Oh my gosh, I forgot. I can't think of the name of the theater, but it's like IRT Theater. Anyway, but they're talking with me. They're like, "Hey, Ethan, how like we need $12,300. You know, you have artistic finance. Can you help us like figure this budget out?" And we look at our budget, and will you help? Anyway, as we're talking about this, I'm like, I've been saying, well, who's going to come see your show? Like your family and friends. Like what you're saying is like, why is this Pookie Goes Grenading is the name of the show. It's a teenage story set in New Jersey. I'm like, who is going to come see this show? Like, would Ethan want to go see this story about teenagers in New Jersey trying to put on a play? And I might actually, but I'm trying to think, how do we, this is like summing up a lot of the stuff we've discussed today, which is like, how do we make it relevant? How do we make it not about, I'm putting on a show, come see the show because I'm putting it on, but come see this show. What is the moral of the story, or what is like the reason for going to see it? So this conversation about how to manage social media as an extension of me and what I find interesting, of what is the intellectual interest. That's all in my head of thinking about how can I approach this play, like helping her with the play through social media and through just audience building. Anyway, you have my wheels turning.
Oh, good. I mean, I like to think as a consultant, I am a wheel turner and a facilitator. That's what I think as a producer. I'm a facilitator, helping people realize their vision. And it's funny that you were having this discussion because I actually do have a talk that I give about audience segmentation. And it's called Beyond If You Build It, They Will Come. Because so many times people think about, we made a show. And as you're saying, we're used to, even in grade school, we're doing a talent show. Our parents are going to be there and our classmates are going to be there. So we have a built-in audience. But once we grow out of grade school, our parents are going to come here all the time now. So who's going to come see it? And it's like, yeah, let's talk about that audience segmentation. Who wants to go see your show and how can we get them? And it's really funny because I even help people understand that is actually using the Super Bowl halftime show, whether it's the Super Bowl halftime show, the Puppy Bowl, or any other things that are happening during that time. Who is that audience?
Of your jobs that you've had, which has been the most well compensated?
It's so tough because I'm trying to see what is public and what is not. Working for nonprofits, you say you can be not compensated. However, working in nonprofits in a broadcast, I have been well compensated. I was freelancing and then I got a call for the Met to continue my freelancing, which was great. Cause it is one of those things of, do you want to work at the Metropolitan Opera? Let me see. Of course, that's the pinnacle of artistry, but also that, I mean, in itself, we can be so attracted to, hey, do you want to do a Broadway show? Absolutely. Did you know that it was only going to last 10 performances and we actually closed before we even opened? No, but now you have a Broadway credit. Is that is that what we're trying to achieve? Is that prestige, those credits that we're getting? And as soon as I was freelance, and then I want to say it was 2008 that if there were freelancers working over 36 hours on the regular, you had to switch them over to actual employees. So then we had to go around all of that. And so then I actually had to take a hit because my hourly rate was not a salaried rate. And now that they're offering actual health benefits and all those employee benefits, that was a cut. As soon as I took on, and I did for personal reasons, I continued with this and I became full-time staff, which was really great. But I want to say a year later, I also took a 10% pay cut, administrative cut because of finances that we all did. So I actually, within a year, I lost 30% of my take home. Then I want to say 5 years later, I got a new job evolution and then I got a decent pay raise. And then that was it for 7 years. So it's a very, very interesting thing of what is keeping my brain occupied is this work. People would always ask me, what's it like working at the Met? And I would say, it's never dull. Every day I would work in a different situation of this person canceled, or we need to adjust this thing, so, or we need to prepare this. So it kept me occupied, but was it really sustainable? Or, the retention value for me, I was kind of like, all right, I think I've stayed my welcome here. And once I left the Met, I was offered a full-time job, and I have that job. And then I was also cold called to do another gig. And that was a seasonal, the entire season, but doing this gig. Within 2 months from leaving the Met, I doubled my income, my annual income. So I don't know whether you could call that lucrative because it's like, well, you worked somewhere and you honed your skills for 15 years and you have so much experience because of all these things that now my value was raised. But then also I did direct a gig. I directed a live stream, not a live stream. I directed a broadcast to tape. And that was a week. And that is the largest sum of money I was ever paid for a week of work. So that was for me aligning with like a show design fee or something like that. It's like, nope, you're directing this. This is how much we're paying you. And I'm like, are you serious? I didn't say that, but I held it in. I was like, what? This is triple what I've ever received for a weekly. And I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, I mean, so much there because the nonprofit, somebody in marketing once told me they said, well, the NFL is the largest nonprofit in the world or something.
Correct.
Like
It is.
Like, you don't think NFL and people don't get paid well. No, you think people get paid because the NFL is big money and all this. But technically it's a nonprofit. So there is a world of pay in nonprofit life.
Right. What I learned is nonprofit. The NFL is nonprofit, but the Dallas Cowboys or the Cincinnati Bengals are not. So that like they have to set up. But if like similar to the Broadway League is nonprofit, but
Broadway, yeah,
Broadway itself,
or certain Broadway theaters are nonprofit, yeah, or partnered
yeah,
with, yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking about I was an associate designer for one show at the Met, and I just remember it's a complicated building, and I remember they'd be like, go see the lighting officer, go see this person to do paper, and I would just wander around, and you have to take the right elevator, and oh my goodness. And the good thing about it was the humanity of it. People found you lost, and they would guide you to the right place. That was nice.
Oh yeah, that it's very much the New York set in which like you're on the subway, and as soon as you get off the subway, you start looking around. People will help you, direct you. The moment that you're in the middle of a hallway of the Met, obviously you're backstage or somewhere, so you have access, and so you're already at this space. Where do you need to go? And then we're like, okay, you're actually going to talk to this person. This is how you handle them. This is how this happens, and this, and you get in. And that's the beauty of the family of working in companies like that.
Yeah. And then I'm in those wonderings. There's so many offices there, and I was always like, who are all these people? Not who are all these people, but I'm in production, right? So then the administrative stuff, sometimes I forget like how involved, like how many full-time people it takes to keep an institution running. And same thing here at Alabama Shakespeare Festival. They have, I joke because it seems like all the administrative staff have dogs. And to me, that's a symbolic, like, oh, they have like a 9 to 5 enough that they can have a dog, and they clearly can all bring their dogs to the office. So it makes me happy, but it's also like, these are all people working in the arts that are just very different from my career in the arts, even though we're all working together.
Yeah, it was kind of fun because for those who don't know, the Metropolitan Opera House, obviously, there are offices all around the auditorium. And so if you're looking at the opera house, the stuff that's in the front, that's in the auditorium area, whether that's like you could say in front of the stage, that is all primarily administrative offices, and then everything backstage are the production offices. So the fun part is there are elevators on either side of the stage that go right up to each level, but I was on the 4th floor for most of my work there, and I was in the front part of the stage. I was in front of the stage, but it also happened to be the same level of the scenic artist's side. And I actually had longtime friends socially. We knew each other, and he happened to have day work at the Met painting. So they would just come into my office and just like sit down and like, oh, I'm having my lunch break at your office because it's not loud and metalwork and everything else. So it's always really fun, as you're saying, is like if people can find your office, they'll come and hang. Or it's like, here's the admin solace because everybody else is putting things together. Or yeah, moving out of your regular environment. It's really a fun thing.
Yeah. All right. This is just a fun question. Do you give to charity or do you give back to the universe in any way?
I think I do. I do give to charity. It is, I really say ad hoc. I do have my annual giving for a lot of nonprofits, but I also um more about in need. And I think, it is one of those things, as we talked about, like working for nonprofits, that in itself is the service. I like to think that I contribute to society, and it doesn't always have to be a financial contribution. Helping shape and improve a neighborhood, a community park, or anything like that.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So regarding finances, what is some advice that you can give somebody who's starting their career right now? So maybe just getting out of college, or if they're skipping that, getting out of high school, and they're going to be maybe a performer, maybe producing isn't quite on the horizon, or if they're going to be a producer. But is there any advice regarding the finances or career longevity that you could give them?
You don't have to be given a silver spoon to do it. I still have my own existential dilemma of, oh, if I only had a trust fund, this could have been fixed. Or if, I still bemoan that I have been doing this on my own. However, I've also come around to, yes, people can do this on their own. I definitely think financial literacy courses are important. I also think anytime that you have an opportunity to talk to somebody about their craft, that'll help you enrich your empathy towards people, but as well as your idea and considerations. Because now you know what to consider when you want to produce a show, and now you know what the lighting is involved in. Then you know what the wigs are involved in. So allowing that on the job research and education, and that also is with the finances are iterative. Just because this is what you did on your taxes this year, it might be totally different next year, but now and you're constantly going to build from what you're doing, and it winds up scaling yourself.
I love that. And also what you said early on in the interview, you said, I got a piece of paper that told me I could sing. And I feel like that's arts in a nutshell, is like, there's so much that you have to learn by doing, or you learn inherently, or you just, so like, don't worry about what you're learning in school, because you're going to have to learn so much more. That's totally fine. But it's like that Obama quote of, figure out how to get things done. Like, that's the skill you need, is figure out how to get things done.
Yeah.
That's it. All right. So we heard about your Substack and your LinkedIn. Where can people connect with you, and who do you want to connect with you?
My office is Principe Dynamics, or Principe Dynamics. So you could always find me on Instagram and my Substack with there, as well as my website. I'm always interested in connecting with potential collaborators. I'm also interested in potential investors, because I do have various projects that are in the pipeline that have value. Actually, getting off this call, I'm developing and collaborating with a podcast, but I also just have 3 other films in development. One which was Academy qualifying, another one which was just nominated for an Academy Award, and another one that's in development. And so getting to know people, and just, you can also, on my website, you can always schedule a call with me if you have questions, if you want to just talk, and I'm always game to see where things are going. It's always been, I don't know with you, Ethan, of like, you've been, I don't want to say forced, but you've been put into a room with people, and then you get to know them, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. And then you're like, hey, I might need to talk to you about this thing that I've got going on. And so it's always good to hear that. And yes, I do have cold calls, or people will come in from network that I don't know, but I always like having a frame of reference from people. If they schedule a consultation or a meeting with me, that they actually tell me how they got to know me, or know of me, or who referred them, so I can see where the alignment can be.
That's awesome. And I used to listen to a bunch of business podcasts and books, and they always talk about mastermind groups. And I think that's what you're describing right there, is like you get enough people in the room, and they don't even have to be aligned in their goals or what they want to do with their life, but it's just about, we all have things we want to do, and then the, I guess, synergy, that crazy word, of
Yeah.
the connecting of pieces and things. Yeah, that's what I feel like. That's what this career and life is all about.
Yeah, I have a few standing meetings that we're just like chilling on Zoom like once a month, that we're just like, oh, this is what you're, just sounding boards and just talking through things. It'd always be good. And then it's like, oh, I actually have a gig for you. Yes.
Yeah, and then you mentioned investors, so I'm just curious, because again, I mentioned that I got into this thinking, oh, I can help all the lighting designers in the world become investors in the show, and then they'll make money if like the shows do well. So, real investors, accredited investors, like, are you looking for accredited investors,
So,
or
so this is, I mean, now we can actually talk about finances, in which, are we talking about accredited investors in the idea of a Broadway show, or are we talking about investors who are patrons who are receiving tax deductions because this is a fiscally sponsored idea? Or are you investing your resources? Are you investing your time? Are you investing your voice into this? So I'm saying it very broadly, that it's not always a concrete accredited investors, although it would be really fantastic to source some more accredited investors, so when the opportunity arises, that's always wonderful. But also those who are interested in helping artists stay on stage, but also like, are these the stories that you want out there? These are ways that you can invest your time or resources into that. So that's really what I'm like. If people are, what projects do you have going on, and how can we help get that going? It could also be corporate sponsorship, or not even as we call it corporate, but there could be sponsors for anything that we're working on. Yeah, even a podcast, or cross pollination of like, I have a podcast, I want to talk to you about this. Oh, well, I'm developing a podcast, so I'm going to talk to you, or we can do a cross sponsored relationship about that.
amazing. All right. Well, Matthew, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Shout out to Cookie Jordan, who put us in touch, and
Yes, we love Cookie.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great to meet you, and great to chat with you about this. It's so important to have these conversations. So I'm really grateful that you have this platform.
That's it for this week's episode. What a great conversation, hitting on so many important perspectives. All right, my takeaways are: hiring a qualified person to file your taxes. Again, I'd say it's 50-50 on how many people on the show have filed their own taxes. But again, here is somebody saying, hire somebody who can do it properly, can do it faster, can do it more correctly, can do it without you having all the emotional complications and/or making mistakes. Tied into that, taking the emotion out of our financial life, it's so true. And as Matthew said, taking agency over these things, because they're cut and dry, they're just data. We don't need that emotional baggage. Case in point, I've mentioned on previous episodes that I'm lighting a show in LA this February. So today I was sent the contract, and I'm so glad, because we did the back and forth on the fee already. And since I personally can't do what Matthew's saying, which is get the emotions out of the negotiation, it's never fun for me, that part. But now that's behind us, and I just have to sign the contract, send it back, and then it's all cut and dry from here. So I can move on and do the actual lighting part of the job. The Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program for student loans. Now, there's a link in the show notes to an article that has all of the student loan forgiveness options. There's about 6 of them. So if you have student loans, you could at least take a look at that link. Maybe you've thought it. I like to think that you've already looked at it and said, no, those aren't for me. But that link and links to everything else we talked about today is at artisticfinance.com/205. My final takeaway is networking, but not as an individual, doing it through organizations. Now, this is something I love because organizations are bigger than us, right? It's sort of like taking the emotion out of things, right? So networking, I just think of it and I'm like, that doesn't sound fun as, for me as an individual. But like growing up, I went to a church, right? And something that is wonderful about church is the community, right? It's like a network that's just built there and everybody's found something that unites them. And we give it so much importance that it's just a given that if you sign on to that, you're part of the team. So Matthew mentions organizations. So like the producing network or the opera network. And that is a wonderful built-in group that is united over something. And then within that structure, you're already next to like-minded people. And so the connections become obvious. Matthew thankfully answered the question and directly said, it's networking, this is how I network, but not in a way that's smarmy when I think of like, I need to go out and network. The way I've coped with networking is I always say, like, I can do it one-on-one. Like, I can have conversations, I can talk to people one-on-one, and that's how I can do my networking. But Matthew gravitating toward an organization and going to the events they host and the connecting points that they make, that just makes a totally natural place for you to find your people. So just go be you because you are needed. You have skills and things that are needed by other people. And voila, let it work out that way. Thank you, Matthew, for sharing your time, your energy today. I loved so many of the things that we talked about. And now let me leave this episode with a little bit of a story that I mentioned a couple episodes ago, that there was a theater in St. Louis that asked me to light a musical for $1,500. And I was sort of weighing how I was going to do that. Now, I don't actually want to share this story because I think I'm the problem in the story. Like, I think I'm the villain, maybe. But I am going to share it because it's a human experience and I'm feeling icky about the whole thing. But you may have gotten yourself into a situation like this. And I just want you to know that there are people like you who have gotten themselves in situations like this too. So you be the judge. Maybe I'm the villain. Maybe I'm not. I don't know. But here it goes. And to be clear, this is a fictional story. So if you ever think that you know the company or the people involved, you do not, because this has never happened. And we're just going to say this is a fictional situation at a theater company in the small village of Anatevka. Okay, but first off, the pay is actually $1,800. I had said $1,500 because I asked to be put on a USA 829 contract. And as such, the company cuts down the pay to $1,480, and then they put that $320 difference toward the union pension and welfare. So I called the gig $1,500, but it is technically $1,800 that the company is paying. So now the situation, I asked to bring on a co-designer, so that way I can not have to sit through all the previews, and that one of my students can have a professional design credit. So the artistic director agreed to that as long as I would split the fee, and they, as a company, didn't have to pay any more. So I asked the student from Webster's University in Anatevka, this fictional place I've created. So I asked the student from Webster to co-design, and we were going to each get $900. So then the artistic director sends me a contract to sign, and it says $1,800 for my fee and then a lighting materials budget of $1,000. And that is the lighting budget for the shows that I have worked on previously with them. So I reply and I say, I would like one contract for me and then another for the other designer. And can we take $200 from the $1,000 material budget and put that in the design fees? So that way, each of us as a designer gets $1,000 and we'll have $800 for the materials budget. So the artistic director emails back, says that they cannot commit to that, and let's talk on the phone. So we jump on the phone and they say, no, that's too much. They can't do it. And the explanation being that that $1,000 material budget doesn't actually exist, so that if we don't use it for lighting, they get to keep it as a company. So they can't take the $200 because then they actually have to spend the $200 versus if we don't put it into lighting things, then they get to keep it. Which obviously my gut reaction to that is, okay, well then I'm going to spend the whole $1,000. So it's irrelevant what you're saying. But anyway, that was the negative thinking in me. Now this is where I'm not proud of myself, because this was a gut reaction, sort of an emotional reaction. And when they said they couldn't do this, I said, okay, I think you should find another designer. And I sort of said it like that. And it was blunt, but I didn't see any good outcomes. From my perspective, they clearly don't value the design work, because if they did, there would have been some attempt to accommodate. I'm not exactly sure what that looks like, but just saying it's too complicated for us and we can't do that was zero movement on their part. So if moving $200 from one place in the budget to another is me asking for too much, then I have to walk away, because denying that means that you're asking me not to take up space. And if I can't take up space, then what am I doing? Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your show budget, but I can remove myself from the situation. So I decided that that's what I was going to do. And I did follow up with an email later that night. And I said that it's not my intention to be hard to work with, but I wanted them to know what they're asking of me. I included a spreadsheet of hours that I would be working on the show, and it came out to 172 hours. So I let them know that you're asking me to put in 172 hours to light a show, which, as we all know, that could easily balloon in hours, but it puts the hourly pay at $4.80. And now I'm me, so there are plenty of situations in which I will happily work for that. And in this instance, I was going to have a student get a professional design credit, and for me, that was valuable. Anyway, there are some other details I'm leaving out that would probably provide some clarity. And then again, you're also only hearing my side of the story in this fictional world, so there is no other side. But I just wanted to throw this out as an experience that I had, because I'm feeling both like upset at myself for not getting my student the design gig. And yes, I will throw out that I did try to get the student the design fully. Like that was my first option was, hey, what if my student just does it? But the artistic director didn't want that. You know, they said they wanted a professional designer. They needed a good designer. So that's when I said, well, okay, if you let me co-design, then we both get something here. Anyway, I'm not second guessing my decision. Like I'm feeling icky about the whole thing, but if I were to go back in time, I would still let the gig go, because that's 172 hours of my life that I can use now. All right, so that's that. I don't have a moral to the story other than it's an experience I went through, and I'm not here to just talk about me, myself, and I and gossip, but it seemed like a relevant experience to this mess of business and career and show business and arts and the performing arts in America. What can I say? Now, I know you might be thinking, I haven't mentioned the Patreon page in a while. You're so right. So if you are, let's say, bored with your life, or maybe you just want to support the podcast that I'm doing or the interviews that I'm doing, and you're feeling generous, I would not turn you away from joining up as a patron. To the 28 of you who are patrons, I don't deserve you. I don't deserve your kindness. I am very, very much appreciative. And I will just say in general for the podcast world that I have not made money on the podcast. And it's just because all of the costs associated with it, because this is America, baby, and everything costs money. I don't know how or why, but the equipment, everything. So anyway, if you want to join the group, if you want to help me out, you can do that by going to patreon.com/artisticfinance. And I'll also mention that if you're not into spending money, and I don't blame you, there is a free Patreon tier you can sign up for, and you won't get the episodes early, but you'll get them when they come out in the public feed. And then you'll get emails keeping you in the loop as to what's going on with artistic finance. And speaking of, we're getting closer to coordinating a live recording in New York City sometime this fall. I don't want to speak about it too much because it's all a little hazy, but we are marching closer to sorting that out. Mentioning that because I'm sure that I will put that into the Patreon feed when I sort out what the details are. It's a small room, so it's definitely going to be invite only. And weirdly, I don't know that I control the invite list. I think that's up to other people. So I can't guarantee that if you're free, you can attend. But if that is an option, I will definitely be letting you know. And I'm surely I can get some people into this recording. I'm sure of it. All right, that is it for today. I cannot thank you enough for listening to the show. It means so much to me. And I hope it's relevant. I hope it's helpful. I hope it's, I just want to be useful, right? Like Matthew's saying, I want to help people stay on stage, and I want to help people stay in this career, myself included, but also everybody else. I want us all to make this career sustainable. Okay, that's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.